Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and publishing. And today we are delighted to welcome Molly Arbuthnott, who is a globe-trotting, jet-setting author of children's novels. She is joining us all the way from, I believe, the UK. How are you doing today, Molly?
Hi, fine, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Oh, well, we are delighted to have you. We're really excited to chat to you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland, and thanks for joining us, Molly. Yeah, you travel around the world with doing, promotion and such for your children's books, and you've written quite a number of them. I think it's something like 18, right? So we want to talk about that, and we want to, some of our listeners might want to write children's books, might be thinking about getting into that. Maybe they already do, and they just want to hear some tips from somebody who's written so many of them. So why don't we start off by just you giving us sort of a brief history of yourself and how you got into writing children's books and how you've gotten so far along, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I used to be a teacher. I taught in Kenya and Italy and London. And then I decided that the best use of my energy would be to put it into writing books. And so I was given a year's sabbatical from the school I was at, and went all guns on my books and never looked back.
That's what we'd like to hear. I don't think we covered the fact that you taught in Kenya before. My parents got married in Kenya. My brother was born there.
Oh,
so
no
that's
way.
a topic for another day.
Oh my goodness, there's lots to dissect.
Absolutely. So you took the plunge to take a year off from teaching just to see whether it worked. That's an amazing amount of courage to do that.
Well, yeah, and my father was very unimpressed. I was teaching in a very smart school in Chelsea, and then became penniless practically overnight. So not one for the faint-hearted.
So what made you decide to do that, to take that plunge?
I just felt the universe was telling me to. I'm quite spiritual in my beliefs, and I kind of feel, well, I was talking with somebody about this the other day, that as people get older, they kind of develop onion skins, or skins like onions. And if you're not careful, you kind of get more and more skins, and then it kind of separates you more and more from who you really are and what the world's telling you to do. And I kind of try to keep my skins as thin as possible. It's the reason really I'm sitting here. I'm in Edinburgh at the moment because I felt the universe told me I should buy a flat in Edinburgh. And so I did. And now my books have moved from under my parents' house to a very nice bookcase. And so that's a sort of step in the right direction. And I felt like the universe was just telling me I should write books. And I don't find it too hard to come up with the ideas, and they sell relatively all right, and it gives me quite a nice life. So, well, make hay while the sun shines.
Exactly. But when you were teaching, had you written any books during that point that gave you sort of the confidence to know that you could do it? Or you were just like, I've never written a book, I'm going to take a year-long sabbatical and just give that a try?
No, I hadn't. But I write a lot of letters. I have a very creative family. And I kind of knew that if I couldn't make ends meet, I could go back to teaching. So it wasn't really quite such a sort of jump of faith, because I knew that I did kind of have a backup plan if I needed it.
Right. I mean, that's sort of, I'm sure I've talked about it in some of the early podcasts, but that's sort of like the trajectory that I went on as well, where I took a year-long sabbatical to try writing. But for me, I had started writing while I was in my previous job, and I was able to see that I was successful at it. I was making money, so it was kind of like a math formula where it was like, okay, I'm making this much because and spending this much time. If I spent 100% of my time, I can make this much more. So it was sort of like worth taking for me, because I'm risk averse most of the times. I was, and I had kids and family and everything to support. So, but it was a big step to say, okay, I'm gonna but at least I had sort of like you, it was like I had that sabbatical. So if it didn't work out, I could go back. And that made it a little less risky feeling. So I know how that feels, though, is taking that jump. It's great.
Yeah,
it's great that you did it and it worked
well
out.
I feel that, I mean, like for anything in life, if you want to do it well, I've always believed you have to jump in 100%, because otherwise you can never give everything to something. I mean, I think that goes for anything in life. You've kind of got to fully commit, even if it is a bit scary.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, so you took that sabbatical and then you went off and you wrote, I mean, you've got 17, 18 books published now. Is that right?
Yes, working on the 19th as we speak. And then I'm doing my animation screenings as animation alongside it now as well. But I can't remember what I was going to say. But yes, I've written, there are 18 and they are slowly building traction.
That's
But
great.
oh yes,
Animation
no,
as
that's
well.
what I was going to say. Sorry, between writing, I went and did a master's in children's literature at Glasgow Uni, and so that kind of gave me a bit of kind of validation for what I was doing. And then I thought for a long time I had to do a PhD to kind of justify what I was writing, but the fates didn't really sort of make that happen. And actually I'm quite glad it didn't. And now I've kind of come to terms with the fact that my writing can stand as credible on its own without needing any further validation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. And that's writing is one of those things that has like multiple different entry points. And really, if you've got the satisfaction of like selling books, people reading them, that's the real important validation, isn't it?
That kind of bring joy. I had a really nice message. Because I'm doing a screening in London tomorrow for my animation. I'm mildly terrified nobody's going to come, but I had a really nice message today on my social media. I was doing a video of spinning. I kind of spin when I am in a place. It kind of grounds me. When I'm working somewhere, I always do a spin before I'm going to an event. And so I was spinning away in Clapham Picture House and shared my video on socials. And then someone really nice said, oh, well, you kind of seem to value anyone from wherever they've come from and whatever they're doing. And I thought that was really nice, because it's quite easy in life to kind of get set in your little rut. And I think it's very important to feel like anyone and everyone has something.
So now, when you say spin, do you mean spin on one of those spin bikes?
No. Spin on the ground, round in a circle.
Oh, that's much more that there. I was like, that's much more romantic. And yes, there we go. I like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I recommend trying.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. Spin it, like you just stand and spin around.
Yes.
And what does that do?
Poor Craig has lost his youthful innocence.
I thought you were spinning out, like, oh, you're worried nobody's going to come. You're emotionally spinning out.
Well, that too, maybe.
What does spinning around in a circle do?
It just grounds me.
Besides make you dizzy.
That a bit too, but it kind of for me it brings the spirits of anything and everyone to a place, and it grounds me in the place because you're physically grounded there after spinning around on the same spot. It's kind of like a screwdriver, kind of, into the ground.
And after you spun around, do you fall over because you're so dizzy?
No, because I don't spin for that long. Just a few turns. A couple of turns.
All right.
And not like a little,
okay.
and also I think the older you get, the less dizzy you become, because I was spinning with a little kid the other day and he became far dizzier before me. It'd be quite an interesting observation sometime, or experiment, to spin with people of all sorts of different ages, and then you could identify who gets dizzy first.
There might
I'll
be,
have to
but
go down and get my kids spinning.
I know that at in my 50s, where I am now, I can't even go on roller coasters anymore because I feel nauseous. anything that spins or goes around, yeah, done. And when I was young, I could do those no problem. So I don't know. Spinning to me is that sounds pretty radical. So with your books, are they also, you've written, you said you're about to publish 19th. Are they all sort of in, is it a series, or are they all about different topics, or how do you pick the topics?
There
walk us through
are
that.
4 that are a series of Oscar books. The cat, Oscar the cat, and then the others are different animals. After university, I found it really hard when people, for whatever reason, were not in your life anymore. And so I kind of, rather than feeling sad about it, I anthropomorphized my friends into animals. And then I can kind of carry them with me wherever I go.
Oh, that's really sweet.
I've got hundreds of ideas now, hundreds of story ideas that I can just kind of bring out as time goes by.
And what do you do for the illustrations? Are you illustrating them yourself, or you hire?
No, I don't have time to do that. I work with 6 different illustrators, and they at the moment I'm alternating between 2 illustrators pretty much, and they take in turns to illustrate the books.
And is that because you like different styles for different books that you're doing?
Yeah, and it's just the way it's kind of panned out. So when I lived in Kenya, I wrote a story about a cheetah who I got to know there that was illustrated by the owner. But then it made sense for her to illustrate that one, but not the other ones. And then the Oscar ones were all illustrated by the same person, which kind of made sense. But then I had to find somebody else for the other ones. And it's just the way it's just the way that it happens. And then I was worked with an artist for one, and she was doing an art course that had 90 different artists on, and she opened up the invite to all 90 to illustrate a book. And so then I kind of had suddenly a choice of 90 different illustrate artists to work with. And it's kind of been a different experience with these last 2 that I got from that, because they're professional illustrators who are really wanting to do this as their job, whereas before it had really been me just working with my friends, which is really fun, but the vibe's just a little bit different. And this kind of feels a bit more kind of professional and proper.
Right. And then when you hire your illustrator, I know that's different. We've talked to children's book authors before, and it seems like there's different compensation models that they use. Some of them just pay a flat fee, some do some kind of a revenue sharing, give credit. Some of them give credit to the illustrator as a byline on the front of the book. Like how is it that you handle the illustration side of it?
It's in terms of the financial remuneration.
Well, yeah, like, are you paying them, per book, or are you doing some kind of a profit sharing? And
I pay a set fee up front.
Okay.
And then, depending on when I reach a certain level for book sales, I then pay them more, but I haven't reached that level really yet, so I haven't had to worry. But once I reach a certain threshold, my plan was to pay them £1 per book. But I mean, that's taking into account the money I spent for the business and everything else. So it takes a long time to reach a level where you're making significant profit, as I'm sure you're aware. So I'm kind of having to be a little bit careful until such a level's met.
Well, that's a fair assessment. So you have a contract that you say basically, I give you a fixed amount for this much, and then once we get to a certain level of book sales, we'll give you this other amount. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Well, I was hoping it would kind of mean that then it was invested interest for the book to do well. And I feel like that's kind of being reached. But again, there's only so much an illustrator can do, and it kind of falls down to me quite a lot. But then I kind of have to account for that in the finances and the funds. It's quite easy to kind of undersell yourself as well as a creative. You kind of feel like you're working for nothing a lot of the time because there's no tangible reward or tangible thing that you can leave someone with. And inevitably I offer my services to schools and they turn around and say, oh, well, we don't have the funding. I say, well, I'll still just go. And then suddenly that's a day that you've lost when you could have been, I don't know, doing other things. And you realize that you've not really got anything for it other than making a few kids happy is great. But you kind of, there reaches a stage where you sort of have to find the balance a bit for your own protection, really.
Right.
But it's a hard road to navigate, and especially as well if you're working for kids, you kind of then have the not only no tangible asset, but you kind of feel emotionally invested that you ought to be doing everything you can because it's for a child. And I don't know, it's a hard balance to find and to keep.
Right. If you are writing it for the kids, obviously you're hoping it's the parents or the teachers that buy the books, obviously not the kids. So when you go to do those school events, is that your hope? Is that they'll end up taking the book and suggesting it as something that parents would buy, or that kids will go home and say, hey, I read this great book at school, we should go buy it now? Is that sort of the hope? Like, is this a marketing effort that you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's the hope. And I've kind of, because I didn't know this book world at all, and so now I was kind of launching in without really needing to worry too much, but now I'm trying to be a little more strategic and economical in my selling of the books and things, because you kind of have to be the most successful book that I've done so far was Eddie the Duckling, that was labeled as early years, because I've learned that people really like seeing a book as a label. I've kind of always marketed my books as being a book for any age, because the sign of a good book means any age can enjoy it. But buyers really like having that label. It kind of gives them a sense of security and belief that the book is kind of perfect for their child. So I've learned that I have to box. But it's hard to box a book into a certain bracket, because then it puts off anyone who's not in that bracket taking it and reading it. And I think picture books, particularly in our modern life, are really important for all ages. So I'm trying to kind of promote the picture book as being a book for all ages, and yet I'm kind of feeling shoehorned into having to box it into a certain age as well. So again, trying to find that balance.
Well, are you selling these as ebooks or as hard
Oh,
copies?
I'm trying to put them onto every platform that's going, to be honest now, because I feel like you want to make it as accessible as possible.
Right. What I'm getting at is the idea that, with self-publishing and ebooks, like you could potentially do two versions of the same book, and one of them you label with early years all over it, and the other one you don't, right?
Yeah,
so that
that's
you
true.
have a version. It's harder if you're selling a lot of the hard copy versions, because then having to produce 2 copies is a lot more work and time and effort and expense than it is if it was just an ebook, 2 things up on Amazon, 2 different ASNs or whatever it is, right? Yeah. What do you find that more, because I think with children's books, because they're graphical and visual, I think that usually the parents like to buy the physical copy of it. Do you find you're selling more physical books or more ebooks?
I have not sold that many ebooks. I sold a book today on Etsy. That it's a rather slow burner, but occasionally it kind of comes out trumps. But I haven't really marketed myself well enough to be able to identify which is the bestseller. I do sell my books through my website as well, which I kind of like to do because I can sign the books for people, and you feel like you can tangibly see a book going off. But I need to kind of get a bit better at the online selling is kind of a whole job in itself, pretty much, to do it well. So that's one I'm navigating.
Yeah. Promotion and advertising.
I think diversity is a good thing. A lot of people just stick stuff on Amazon. They're done. I think diversity is very important in terms of where you sell your books, rather than just like sticking them on Amazon and being like, job done. So
yeah.
Well, also it then supports as many different platforms as possible, which I think is important because we don't want to give everything to Amazon.
True. So where do you produce your books? Is that through, I guess not through Amazon's paperback or their imprint? What do you use?
Well, I have a publisher in Cardiff, Sean Russell, who's kind of been my mentor really throughout this whole process. He's amazing, and he kind of guides me and supports me and keeps me on track. And so we produce a physical book then, and then from that I can produce the ebook or whatever the book needs to be.
Right. So are you published through their imprint then, or are you self-published?
I'm self-published, but I can with Sean's publishing house, I can, if I need to, I can be self-published, or if I need to, I can be published. It's kind of quite a nice position to be in because it gives you a foot in both kind of fields. As and when you need, because sometimes it's more advantageous to be published and sometimes it's more advantageous to be self-published. So it kind of depends.
Right.
And there's a certain, we were talking about validation earlier of like people reading your books gives you validation. Having a relationship, I think, with a publisher, we might embrace self-publishing, but it is nice to have a publisher be like, I have enough faith in your books to support what you're doing.
Yeah, no, Sean's been amazing. He's a great advisor and great and just a really great guy. We're going to be in Bologna together in next month, which will be very nice. And then I go down to Cardiff from time to time.
So when you do marketing, I guess you're doing it yourself. You're booking. So let's start it here. What kind of marketing are you doing? Because I know that recently you went to Australia to do some marketing. So what kind of marketing are you going to? Are you scheduling stops at bookstores to do signings? Are you going to events? Like, how are you handling the marketing?
Well, again, the traction slowly builds up for that, and I'm trying to learn how to be strategic about it and not to completely burn myself out by going to absolutely everything and doing everything all the time. I'm not very good at saying no, but I'm beginning to learn to occasionally. After I've got 2 screenings for my animation this week, and then once those are completed and done, I'm going to take stock for a bit and just get all my platforms kind of in sync and up and running, and apply for a few competitions and things. And I'm going to try a Kickstarter as a different form of marketing for a graphic novel I'm doing in India next year. So I will make a start on that shortly. And then the marketing itself, I was at London Book Fair and made a few good contacts who I think I'm going to follow up with shortly. And they have good advice for how to get going on Amazon and all these things. But I kind of used to think I had to be going out doing sort of workshops in schools all the time to be promoting what I'm doing. But I'm trying to find the balance. Quite a lot is just getting all your ducks in a row behind the scenes, I think, before you can really take off and make it work. I feel like my books are kind of I'm in quite a fortunate position because I've got quite a lot of good assets and good material that I still own the copyright of and have possession of, that I feel could do potentially, in sort of the right circumstances and right opportunities, do quite well. So I'm just kind of trying to find that leverage to kind of make them get the recognition they deserve.
Right. So what are these animation screenings? Are you did you have some of your stories turned into short films? Is that how
it was the first one, Oscar the Furry Cat, and I thought, oh well, I'll again, this was a whole new world to me, so I didn't really know what the right or wrong thing to do was. So I've decided to find a few venues in the UK and screen them. And again, in my sort of sense, we just had a big family party, my dad's 80th birthday party at the weekend, and I felt it was a great idea to do my screenings just after that, as one does. So I'm finding the energy to launch off again tomorrow.
That's great. So you get your whole family to see it.
Yeah. But I mean, what are you doing with, like, so what's the goal with the animation though? Is it I don't know a lot about.
Again, I'm kind of keeping it quite private for now, but showing it in a few places, and then hoping that will build traction and interest, and then potentially it will kind of take off from there. But again, it's quite a new world for me. I'm working with an animator who's applying to festivals and competitions and things as we speak, and then we'll just kind of see where it goes.
And is it just the first book, or is it all the stories?
We've only done, it's 11 minutes 11 seconds long, 11:11. Okay. Which I'm hoping is a good sign. Lucky 11. And it's been quite interesting because I've realized that if we can find a home for this kind of pilot episode, it's quite easy to then pad animations out with, so the cats are on the ferry, and then you can have all sorts of adventures that are not completely tied to the book of what they can get up to on the ferry. So it kind of makes my life a bit easier because it means you can get more material for less writing, if that makes sense. Right. Once you've kind of established the characters and established the place, and if it kind of does all right, then that's them kind of set on their life's adventures. So I'm just kind of, it's still very early stages, but reception seems to be pretty good so far, so that kind of makes me hopeful.
And this wasn't the same illustrator that did the original drawings for this book, right?
No, I had to find a CGI animator for this. The original illustrator wasn't that keen to launch into animations, but I am, because I think that if you can get a child enjoying an animation, it will then hopefully naturally lead back to the book. because we've kept the pilot episode very closely aligned to the book. So the idea is that when I do my screenings, I always read the book first and then I show the animation. So I'm kind of hoping that it will incentivize a child to read the book first as well.
That's nice. I really like the way the books and animations, when they stay together. My kids watch a lot of manga, and it's kind of they will diverge hugely, and it's kind of two experiences. So it's nice when they align.
Yeah, well, I think it's important because then one can support the other and vice versa.
Did you have to find? Did the illustrator try to emulate the original sort of style of the book, or did they sort of?
You mean the animator?
Yeah, like did the animators try to emulate the illustrative style that's in the book, or did they sort of go off in their own?
But again, because I wasn't sure whether the illustrator was completely on board with the animation, we kind of were forced to make it a bit different in looks, which I think is fine because the wording and the story is still just like the book. And I think sometimes if you do an animation that you're trying to make look like the book and it doesn't, then you kind of feel like you're not really in one camp or the other. So we've kind of separated enough that you can tell it's the animation, not the book, and yet you can still tell it's linked to the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So because I know that Charlie Maxey, they did his animation and they made it very much look like the illustrations from the book had just kind of jumped off the page, and I think that's great because it worked for that, but I don't think that sort of style would necessarily have worked for this animation. And I think you kind of, it's dangerous if you try and you don't make it work, because then you kind of feel like you failed. So I think it's good to keep the two a little bit separate.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're picking topics, because you've written, 19 different books, how are you deciding, what to write about? Like, do you look into sort of areas that kids that do well with kids books, or from experience working with children know about their, what's important to them, and the kind of topics that you want to cover? Like how would somebody writing children's books go about picking what they want to write about specifically, so that it'll appeal to a child?
You can't really box it in like that. Well, I never approach it like that. Over my dad's party, I had lots of chats, obviously, and one of them was about an atlas moth, because a friend's daughter's boyfriend keeps buying the daughter atlas moths, and the daughter hates it because I don't know how much you know about atlas moths, but they only stay alive for about 5 days because they can't eat. And so her boyfriend gives her these pupae of atlas moth, and the atlas moth is born, and then it kind of eats itself pretty much because it can't eat anything else, and dies 5 days later. And she finds this all a bit harrowing and isn't quite sure what the appeal for the atlas moth is, but the atlas moths keep coming. So I felt like atlas moth could be an interesting moth to identify. And then moths came up in conversation today as well. So I feel like I'm being called to a moth, or then there are lovely flowers all the time, of course, too. And I don't know, for me it just depends what people are talking about at the time.
Okay, but that's more of sort of like the surface topic of the book, but often with children's book there's like an underlying message that you're trying to convey. Is that, or do you just sort of like talk about specifically about that topic, say like to teach kids about atlas moths, or are you really trying to use that as sort of an allegory or a metaphor for some sort of deeper meaning?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it kind of depends. So the atlas moth that can't eat could then be kind of used for a child who can't speak or can't smell, or you can maybe sort of use that idea but just switch it around a little bit. And then and then maybe they find a skill in a different way. So all my books are kind of about the underdog in some capacity who then comes out on top. And once you've kind of got that as your theme, it's quite easy to then link that into any animal that you come across, pretty much.
Okay, so yeah, so then that's the sort of underlying theme, the underdog story, which is always a good one for kids. So, you know, you have a lot of experience, you've written a lot of these books. Do you have any kind of advice that you give to other authors that write for children or that want to write for children?
That it's not as easy as it looks. And to always make it work for you. I feel like sometimes I can get I can get pulled away from that balance and find that suddenly I'm kind of working for my books, and you have to keep it always working for you, otherwise you lose the joy. And if you don't have the joy, then you don't put in the work, and if you don't put in the work, then you don't have the books. So you kind of have to keep the joy and keep the balance always in your favor.
Right. Yeah, I guess, I mean, some people might look at children's books and be like, okay, well, you know, there's only 10, 20 pages and there's only a few words, so it must be easier. But there, like anything, there's a set of challenges that are unique to that writing in that genre, right? And writing for children in general, you have to think about your message. You have to appeal to not just the kids, but their parents who are buying the books. You have to, you know, think about working with your illustrators and finding the illustrators, and, you know, so yeah, I guess there's a lot of parts that maybe on the surface do make it seem like it's an easier thing than just writing a novel.
Yeah, well, I find that the writing itself is the easy bit. It's everything that comes after that's really hard.
Right.
And you're having to, in some ways, I mean, you're having to kind of put yourself out there in every day, and sometimes that can get a little bit not soul destroying, but just a bit kind of, if you're ever having a kind of blur day, you can't really be a blur sort of figure. You have to just pull it together. And sometimes you can do that really easily, and other times it's kind of a bit trickier, but you just keep going. Like anything.
Keeping on.
Yeah.
So are you constantly sort of like working on the next book, or how does your sort of writing day get filled at this point in your career?
Well, again, I kind of used to think I had to just churn everything out and constantly be kind of making new stories. And I'm kind of, again, now learning to balance it a little bit so that I can just take stock of what I have done and make that as successful as I can before launching something else. So I'm kind of doing one a year now. I am actually doing a story. There's a primary school in London called Greenside Primary that was actually designed by someone called Goldfinger. You know James Bond, the evil Goldfinger.
I've heard of James Bond, yes.
Well, Goldfinger was an architect who, I don't know if you know this story, but he was an architect who was designing a set of a couple of houses on the street where Ian Fleming lived. Ian Fleming was very against this design, and so then he created Goldfinger as the baddie in his book as a kind of way of vendetta against the real Goldfinger. And anyway, Goldfinger designed this school, Greenside, and Greenside's in need of quite a lot of money, and Greenside used to have some guinea pigs, so I'm trying to write a story about a Greenside guinea pig alongside my own books. It's sometimes nice to do something that's a little bit removed from your own personal work, because then it kind of gives you a different edge and it makes you a more interesting person, and it validates what you do because people can see beyond it just being your books, but more a kind of communal, universal thing. So I try and kind of support others, and I'm trying to do a book for a hospital as well, but there are only so many hours in a day.
Absolutely. Yeah, Roland's our resident James Bond expert. He's always trying to slide in James Bond references.
I didn't even
Oh,
need to.
really?
Molly's
Did you
on
know
my
the
way
story
I know.
about Goldfinger?
I do, and apparently Goldfinger was going to sue Ian Fleming. So Ian Fleming said, "I'll write a retraction in every book that says, I'm sorry, the name isn't actually Goldfinger, it's Goldprick."
Oh, really?
Yes.
But did he end up doing that?
No, he didn't. Mr. Goldfinger decided to let him go with it. But Ian Fleming had a habit of putting people he didn't like as the bad guys in his book. He did it to Aleister Crowley as well.
Really, it's quite. I mean, it's not very subtle, really, is it?
I don't think he was a very subtle man.
Quite an easy way to make enemies.
Yes.
Well, okay, but you were saying earlier that you put your friends into your book. You anthropomorphize your friends.
But that's a
how do they feel like?
That's a slightly different balance. Firstly, they're always really nice characters. Secondly, I would change the name. I offered to change names in advance if the people wish. And thirdly, it's kind of, I mean, it's an animal, so it's kind of has a degree of remove, whereas Ian Fleming was doing very much human. So it was not quite so generous.
Yeah. But do your friends like the fact that you put them in your books?
Yes, well, very much. I mean, the last one, Eamon the Bat, is I think I can claim this, is about a friend who's from Australia. And I did offer to, he's called Eamon, and I did offer to change the name, but he very much wanted to be kind of the proud inspiration for the tales. So Eamon the Bat, it remains.
That's good. I think anybody would like to be immortalized in a book as long as they're not maybe not the villain. I don't know. Some people wouldn't mind being the villain, I guess, either. But
yeah, probably good for their street cred.
Yeah,
Be
that's
an
right.
evil character.
Yeah, depends on the person, I guess.
Yeah.
So if you are sort of giving advice though to other authors, what's sort of like the best piece of advice, other than, it's not as easy as it looks and all that, but if somebody is, ready to go ahead and, they want to get their career going as a children's author, do you have a piece of advice that you would give them?
To have a backup plan in case it doesn't kind of come through, to be quite happy in your own company, because you have to exist on your own quite a lot, and to be quite self-confident. Don't allow for imposter syndrome to enter in, because that doesn't really help anyone or anything. And also to not go on a creative writing course. I've always been a firm believer that it's why I chose to do children's literature rather than creative writing, because I think that if you study what other people have written, then you end up writing what they've written rather than what's true to you. Ironically, actually, since I started writing myself, I now hardly ever read at all. I used to read all the time, and now I don't know whether it's because I'm working in books all the time or what it is, but I just hardly ever read. Which I'm not sure. I mean, I think you can still read books, but I just would be cautious of reading lots of books that are in the same kind of style as what you're wanting to do, because then as well, it leads further down the line to kind of plagiarism and all that kind of thing. And that's another thing, I guess, to make sure you have all your copyright and all your forms in place before you launch the book, because otherwise you shoot yourself in the foot if they're not. It was a trap I fell into when I was working with my illustrators, because they were all friends, and so then I thought, oh well, I'll just blur boundaries, and then no one knows where they stand, and then it all ends up becoming quite tricky quite quickly. So just to make sure that you have the right sort of things in place to protect you and protect them. It's kind of almost more important when it's a good friend to have those that everything in place, much more than if it's someone you don't really know so well, because there's so much more at stake. So just make sure you've got all of those.
It's an interesting point, actually. Is there something, I guess, around the creation of the characters from the illustrator side of it that, you know, you want to make sure that you, even though they created them, but they did it as a work for hire for you, and thus you own the rights to that character, even though they designed it? Is that how it works, or is it sort of like they own sort of the character?
Well, I have now kind of got my contracts in place that I own the right to the book itself, and I can do what I choose with the book's illustrations. But if I wish to create, if I wish to market it or create anything beyond, I have to just I have to make sure I get the kind of go ahead from the illustrator, or I slightly alter the illustration. But I don't know whether, I mean, to be honest, I kind of, you could market it so that, well, you pay a lump sum and that's you buying the rights of the book, because it then kind of becomes a bit complicated. And if the book does do really well, you kind of want to be able to ride the wave and not worry about anything beyond. There's so much to think about anyway that you don't want to add any extra barriers.
Right.
But it's just kind of, it depends. I mean, it slightly depends on how each relationship with the illustrator kind of pans out and what they think and what they want.
I think that's a great observation. Craig, you look like you were poised to say something.
Well, I'm just, I you know, I don't know how any of it really works, but I would think that, you know, if you come up with the idea for the book and the characters and you're hiring somebody to do the illustration, you should own the right. Maybe there would be something about, you know, if you wanted to do a sequel, or if you wanted to do a spin-off, or you wanted to do anything else with that, you might have an agreement to go back to the original illustrator and give them sort of like the first right to do that. But if they say no, you should then be allowed to hire someone else to sort of draw it in the same style. But, you know, that's just my own feeling about it. I have no idea how realistic that is.
Well, it just kind of depends on each case in point, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we're approaching the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap things up. But Molly, this has been a fascinating discussion. And Craig, do you have any final questions before we ask Molly to share all of the details of where we can find out about our books and things like that?
No, I think like you said, I think it's been a great conversation. There's a lot of information about writing books and different aspects of it. And, you know, like I said, I don't know how it all works, but it does sound like it's a complicated relationship. And I think we've heard that in the past too, where, you know, that relationship with the illustrator, it's sort of a one-off. You know, everybody does it differently, and some are going to want to do it their way, and some will do it your way. And
some illustrators want to keep. I mean, some illustrators want to just do the illustration and then move on to something else, whereas others kind of want to keep kind of emotionally or physically invested in what they've created, because it's kind of part of them. There's a very good Society of Authors helped me out a lot at the beginning. They helped me draft all my contracts and helped me negotiate relationships with different people and places. So I guess that's another tip I'd give to anyone wanting to launch into the book world. Make sure you've got a kind of a group of that are in the field of what you're in, who can help you out, if that makes sense. So that then they can advise on contracts, and a sort of group beyond your immediate working people, because they can give a non-biased kind of opinion on things, which is really important sometimes.
Right. Yep,
Absolutely. So for everybody watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, where can they go to find out more about your collection of books and more about you?
Well, I have a website, mollyarbuthnott.co.uk. And my books are on Amazon and all good kind of bookshops and all good outlets.
Fantastic. Well, we will put a link down to your website in the description down below. So if you've been watching this or listening to this, you've enjoyed everything that Molly has shared with us, make sure to scroll down there, click on that link, and go and check out her books, The Adventures of Oscar, the furry cat. And in the meantime, you'll also pass that big empty comment section. So make sure you leave Molly a comment and let her know how much you appreciated everything she shared with us today. There's also that subscribe button if you haven't already, that bell icon that will alert you every time there is a brand new episode. And don't forget to smash that like button, as the kids say. So until then, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Fully Booked. Cheerio.